Hello, welcome back to the studio. Well, this week we're looking at ideas, principally the ideas that really end up going from here onto a canvas. Where do they come from? Where do we get the inspiration from? Now, somewhere on your computer, you probably have a file of good ideas. Maybe you're old-fashioned like me and you just have a paper file full of clippings and cuttings and bits out of magazines. You might sit on your mobile phone doom scrolling, looking for hours upon hours of AI images, Google images. Goodness knows there's so many things. You probably even have a secret book, painting stuff and good ideas. Well, whatever you do use, sometimes the best ideas come from, well, you. That's right. Sometimes I get suggestions. Why don't I paint this? Why don't I paint that? And now and then I think to myself, you know what? Those are some great ideas, and that's the inspiration behind this painting. Now, there is no reference photograph of this painting. It's purely based upon an idea by one of you, my lovely subscribers. So, follow along and see how I develop a painting from, well, a blank, very black canvas to a finished painting. Fingers crossed I can make something good out of this idea. So the process of going from an idea from you to getting it on a canvas, well, there are several steps and processes that one has to go through. One of my first ones is to simply do some very quick, rough sort of patterns and designs and things. And I do them really quickly, landscape and portrait, and I just sort of move things around. I literally spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes on each one of these little sketches just to give me an idea of a layout. What quickly catches my eye, what maybe doesn't look so right, just to get some ideas down. And I may do several sheets of these, refining things, changing things, looking for better ways to put the moon in and where to move things around. Do I have a fir tree or not? Do I just leave it as a nice open woodland? Do I have it as a water? Do I have it as a pathway? All these ideas, they just need to be sort of jotted down on a piece of paper. It's really like sort of painting shorthand. Now, from these, I might get an idea that I like, probably the look of one, maybe not so much the look of another. So maybe I'll think, well, maybe I'll have a go at painting this one as a landscape in a nice woodland. Maybe I'll move that moon down a little bit lower in the finished painting. But this is the place where the idea starts to become reality. So here's the next sketch. As you can see, a little bit bigger, a little bit more care, wasn't quite so scribbly. And again, I start to think about areas which are important. So I have some sort of lines on here. This is 1/3, that's the next third. I know where the hot spots are going to be in my painting. Maybe I want to position the moon just on that third line. That's quite a nice position for it. I've sort of got this line starting about the top of the third line there. It's all a little bit off center, which is nice. And then to take your eye back into the painting, maybe a nice pool or a nice big sort of pond in here. I might look for a reflection of the moon in the water. You see, so suddenly from a basic idea, I've now sort of tried to develop a bit of a sketch. This will be a template, an idea which I can then try and translate onto my canvas. The horizon line, well, that might end up becoming a little bit higher on this side. Maybe it'll end up a little bit lower. I think I'll just feel my way through that bit. But in essence, this is going to be the painting. Now, the next process is how to get that onto a canvas. And for this, I'm going to turn to a bit of a tried and tested use of an underpainting. I'm going to use some acrylics for this. And I can hear you cheering there. There's quite a lot of you that like me to do underpaintings because they are really so easy to work on. They're adaptable and they're fun. You can change them around. And for my acrylics, I always use the same old used brushes. Some of them are bristle brushes, but they're pretty well worn. They're quite tough. Or I use synthetic brushes. Please don't use your oil painting brushes for doing acrylics. They need to be the acrylic brushes. These ones can be washed in soap and water. Oil paint brushes need to be washed, in my opinion, they need to be just washed in thinners and then air dried. I don't like putting soap and water on them. They never seem to have that spring and snap. These brushes, as you see, been washed in soap and water, and well, they're pretty tough and bristly. So let's get on with designing the layout of our painting. So I am going to take just a filbert brush, and I've got some black and white acrylic paint. You could use black and white gesso. There's pretty much the same thing. You can interchange them quite a bit. Now then, I'm going to take a little bit of black and a touch of white to make a dark grey colour, because I want to do some sketching. I've got my reference cartoon here, so I know roughly where I am. I can draw a line that is roughly 1/3 up from the bottom. There will be the second third. That is about 1/3 the way across. And don't worry about these lines. If you want to get rid of them, look, you just put a bit of black paint across them, and they don't really matter. I'm going to have some trees up there anyway, so we can. All this is going to disappear. So I'm making a right mess, aren't I? I don't care. So there you go. I put my third lines on here. Honestly, don't worry about this, folks. I just goofing around there. That will all end up disappearing under black gesso and black acrylic and smoke and mirrors, and you won't see any of it. It'll all be gone by the time you come back to this. So there we go. Let's work on that line here in the background. As I said, it starts up somewhere around about the third line up here. Make that a little bit brighter. You can't see what I'm doing, can you? So somewhere about the third, it's going to drop down to a point close to this third line. Somewhere in here is going to be my moonlight. So a little bit left of centre, sorry, right of centre. It is somewhere in there, and I think come up a little bit on this end. So I think that's my horizon line. And I think make it a little bit brighter. That's going to be my moonlight. And I think I want a little pond. Again, starting on that third line. I want that to be going out the side, so again, going out the side a little bit less than the third. Again, because we're looking at this on edge, we don't want round turns. We want to be having sharp. If we design this, we put in round shapes like that. You see, that looks kind of wrong. That looks like we're looking sort of down on top of it. So instead of going with a round shape, you want to come in here with a sharp shape. That. This is all going to be riverbank, and it's going to be snowy, so I can indicate some snow. Let's put some snowy bits on here. Yeah, don't worry about that too much. Now, if I want to try and get this moonlight to reflect in the water here a little bit, I'd like a little bit of open water down here. It'll make life easier. If I bring my land across here like I did in the sketch, I'm going to cut that off. So let's put that. Let's have that like that. So that way I can get my moonlight. Get my moonlight to shine through there. Get my riverbank over there out the way. There we go. So you see, whilst I'm painting, as I did on my last little video, which you saw me talk about 5 important steps to designing a painting or successfully painting a scene, that keeping in mind where you are and planning your scene is vital. If you kind of just hit and hope, then the chances are you're probably going to end up with a bit of a disaster, because you won't really have thought about what happens when things are in the wrong places. So you see here I'm thinking about moonlight, reflections, water, trees. So it's all about designing things. Now this looks a little bit too open here. I think that wants to go across a little bit more. See, that looks too wide to me. And I want that your eye to go I want your eye to go to the back of the painting. I don't really want your eye going off here. So if I close that out and tighten this up, see what happens. Your eye tends to want to go more to there, not to be lost in this area. Again, I'm just sketching here. And the nice thing is if I do something here that I'm not happy with, you know what, I can just pick up my black paintbrush, I can turn this all back into black and start again. It doesn't matter. And what's behind this? What's happening off in the distance? Nothing? Something? I have to think about that. I didn't put anything on my sketch. There could be lots of hills and things back there, but that wouldn't work. I'd have to go up a little bit. Maybe I'm just going to have lots of small woodland back in there, and just a little hole for the moon to peek through. That looks good, doesn't it? Maybe I'll just do that. So again, I'm just still sketching at this stage. I haven't really painted anything kind of properly. It's just still at the sketching stage of things. But I hope this gives you an idea of the process I go through when I'm sort of starting to do a painting. That I know it looks like it all just magically arrives on the canvas for you to watch in the tutorial, but there's a lot of this sort of stuff goes on in the background. There's a lot of thinking and a lot of kind of cogitating and sitting and looking at your painting and trying to work out, does this work, is this too high or too low? So there's a lot more thought goes into a painting than just sort of rocking up and thinking, that's it, I should do this painting today. So this is something of a weekly routine for me. Every painting I do for the channel requires me to sit and think about all these little details. Occasionally I like to use a Bob Ross painting. It gives me a lot of the basics all figured out, so it means I don't have to keep bashing my brains out. So I hope you appreciate sometimes when I'm painting away, there's maybe a lot of background information that goes into it, a lot of trial and error, and maybe a painting doesn't always work out right. Sometimes they just don't fit. You have to go scrap this and start over again. And that's kind of tough, but it's all good practice. Nothing you do on a canvas is ever wasted. Keep that in mind when things are looking like they're a real pickle. Nothing is ever a waste, just good practice. Well, in that last little sequence, did you spot the little graphic that popped up? It had the words focal point. That is the focal point for this painting. And the reason why I draw your attention to this is because I often get questions about what's missing from my painting. I like my painting, but there's something missing. 9 times out of 10, it's a focal point. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip to go and look at another one of my inspirational artists, Alan Kingwell, down in Cornwall. He paints the most amazing seascapes and landscapes, but look carefully. He always includes a very clear focal point. He wants you to look at a certain point in the painting. He wants to draw your eye in to a focal point and then let your eye wander away from it. So next time you look at your paintings and wonder, something's missing, the question should be, where is my focal point? Now, time to get on with the underpainting. And by the way, I'm going to be doing this underpainting all in acrylic. Once it's completely dry, then we'll glaze it with some oil colour. Now we have the layout of the painting done, we know the focal point. Let's start working on maybe something in the very, very far distant background. Now, remember this is a night scene, so we don't want anything too bright and sparkly back in there, but I do want to include maybe some background clouds. I've gone back to my titanium white for this. Again, even though this is white paint I'm putting on acrylic white, when you put it onto here and you scrub it and you see it quickly goes grey. In actual fact, even if I put it on quite thickly, it'll dry grey. And I want to sort of give maybe the idea that the sort of moonlight is sort of reflecting off some clouds. So this is really just more of a like a placeholder amongst the trees, because we're going to be glazing this with colour. Maybe you can start thinking about the colours we could use. What would you glaze this with? I think we can discount things like bright yellows and crimsons and pinks. Maybe. Well, who knows? But there are other options. So again, it's a cloudy moonlit night, so you can see quite a lot of detail. Maybe this moon's going to be lighting up the sky. So maybe the clouds here are going to be a little brighter, and a little further away it's going to be less and less distinct. So I'm just again laying my brush on its side. I'm just going to scrub this in. As I mentioned, these are more what I call placeholders. They kind of marking the positions of things, but I'm not going to be too dictated by what they actually do. Now let's not lose our little touch of moonlight, which is just going to be there. Now this looks an awful lot brighter on screen than it does in real life, so I am going to turn down. That's what it looks like when I'm painting it. So you've got to understand that it's not quite as bright as when you see it. That's much closer to how it actually looks. So this looks really super bright. It's actually quite grey. So let me turn my exposure back up again so that you get to see it. There we go. If I turn the exposure down too low, all you'll see is me painting a black canvas with colour that looks black. Okay, so here we go. And again, maybe that's the bottom edge of a lovely cloud. Bit too bright maybe. Well, let it sit and dry. See what happens. Don't worry too much. But I do want to put in some distant trees back in here, maybe a bank of trees, all pretty dark. So for my little bank of distant trees, I've got an old bristle brush here, and I think I can just pretty much stipple them into position. I don't have to be too fussy about this. So I'm going to go back into some black, knock out some of the surplus. Remember, these are distant little trees, so they want to be fairly soft. Remember, this moonlight's above these little trees, so you can't have the moonlight looking like it's sitting in front of them. Look at those all leaning into the centre. It's not how trees grow. There we go. They try and grow upright. I catch myself out doing silly things. As I say, this is very much picking my way through this painting here. So I am going to be just doing a little bit, standing back, doing a little bit more. Some of these are just literally holding position for me. They're not doing anything more than that. I'm just going to let the brush slide down a little bit. Make these look a little bit more sort of feathery and distant. I don't really want them to be too sort of heavy. I let this just sit and dry for a few minutes, and now I want to start putting in some nice distant trees. I'd say this is much further away, and I want this to be sort of the edge of the woodland, so it looks like there's a bank here, and then maybe there's a dip, and then this is much further away. So kind of the perspective is a little tricky here, but think of this as being, that's the sort of the line of the woodland, and we're going to put some misty effects in here. So if I did that there, maybe there's water here coming through into the foreground. So I need lots of trees in the background here. And for this, I'm going to use white, a little touch of black. I want a nice light grey colour, because these are quite small trees. And again, I don't want these to be sort of too Too big and strong. I don't want them to be lost. Remember, in a woodland scene, you want a lot of these sorts of trees. There we go. These ones are they're sort of sitting up on this bank in the background. I'm doing these in light grey. I want them to sort of to be in the painting, but I don't want them to be sort of too lost. In other words, the light's catching the side of this little tree. A bit more dark grey, maybe for the back of that tree. As I say, we're going to be putting oil colour over the top of this, so we have to think about the colours which are pale grey are going to be catching a colour which might be blue or grey. So all of these grey sides of the trees are going to be showing up. So we have to be thinking about the source of light and how it's going to reflect and sort of shape these trees. Now, this whole process can take quite some time. So rather than you sit here watching me and listening to me natter on, I'm going to do this with a little bit of time lapse and maybe some nice music. So here's my finished underpainting. I think it's turned out rather nicely. All these various elements like the moon and the riverbank and the trees, as I mentioned, they're what I call placeholders. In other words, points of interest. And it's easy to work in this style because you can add things and rub them out very quickly. Now, if you like it as a black and white, job done. But if you want to add some colour, we have to think about adding some transparent tones over the top. No good using opaque colours because obviously they'll just destroy everything we just created. So we want transparent colours, and the obvious ones are blue colours. Phthalo blue, Prussian blue, maybe even black. But we of course have to think about what it really tries to get across in the painting. Is this a bright tropical moonlit night? That would be a phthalo blue colour. Or is it a sort of slightly cool, spooky night? Prussian blue would be the colour I'd choose. But you can blend them together, mix them up a little bit. Nothing is hard and fast. Remember, this is a bit of a fantasy painting, so you do what you want for your scene. Crikey, you could even throw some crimson on there. Might be a step too far, I think. Anyway, I'm going to use Prussian blue. I'll put a few little tones of phthalo blue in here there as well, just to see what happens. Remember, this is just an experiment. But first, I need to add a clear coat onto this. And for this, I'm going to use some Bob Ross Liquid Clear. If you don't have any of that, you want something like linseed oil. It seals the surface of the canvas and means that you can sort of blend your colours out more easily. Otherwise, they're just going to be very thick and heavy. So that's the next step. Let's get some colour on here. So I've pulled out a selection of brushes. I've got myself a nice old 1-inch landscape brush. That's to scrub on my liquid clear and some colour. And I've got a filbert brush for doing oils and a liner brush as well. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be using this product, Bob Ross Liquid Clear Oil Paint. And this is just to seal my canvas up, but it also means that I've got a wet surface and I can put oil colour on here. I can blend it and scrub it into my canvas. If I don't have this, I could still use oil paint, but it's going to stick to this canvas and it'd be so hard to move the paint. Trust me, you'll have arms like Popeye by the time you finish doing a canvas this size. But listen, if you don't have that, you can always buy something like that. Refined linseed oil. It's very much thinner and runnier, So you only need a tiny little drop of this, and you don't want to over add this to your canvas. It'll get far too wet and slippery. So try and get some Bob Ross Liquid Clear, but this will work if you need it. Just to make life easy, as always, I keep a little bit in an airtight pot, just easy to get my brush into. And I'm going to take a little bit out, dab it on my canvas. You can see as soon as I start adding this, the canvas really starts to come alive. There you go. Well, as it seems to amplify all the colours, so the whites become brighter and the greys become sharper and the black develops a nice blackness. So I'm going to add this all over my canvas, a nice thin even coat. If you want to know how to do this, I did a video all about it, and I'll put a link up here in the corner of the video. There you go, just to test my canvas. In that corner, can you see? I run my finger up and down. It doesn't leave a trail. It's just got that nice little sheen to it. That tells me I'm about right. If you're not sure, you can always take a paper towel, just give it a little bit of a blotting off to remove the surplus. And I need to give this brush a bit of a dry clean on some paper towel, because I want to use it again for adding some colour. I don't want to add any more liquid clear. Now, here's my palette for this painting, and as you can see, it's a bit limited. White, some Prussian blue and some phthalo blue. That's all I really need. I might add another colour, but we'll see later on. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this phthalo blue, as you see, is a bright, sparkly, lovely blue colour. Really not quite the right colour for all of it, but let's say it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? So I'm going to put a little bit of phthalo blue. Sorry, yeah, phthalo blue. Got my blues mixed up then. I'm going to put a little bit of phthalo blue directly behind the moon. Look at that. God. There we go. So it's maybe a slightly brighter blue colour there in the background. And as I say, this is a transparent blue colour, so if you put on too much, just rest your brush against the canvas and with a good old scrub, and you can pick the colour up on your brush and you can move it around. And say, I just want a little bit of sort of phthalo blue through the centre, I think, because if you do put it on really thin, you can end up with this sort of almost sort of muddy, dirty grey colour. And it doesn't really have much of anything going for it. So if you're going to put this colour on, be a little on the strong side with it. Don't be too wishy-washy. Get a good amount on there, like that. You can always scrub off the excess. Now, jumping to that Prussian blue colour. Take a bit of blue into it. Totally different. Just a nice darker blue colour. And I'm going to be using this colour sort of at the edges here. You can see it's a stronger, cool blue colour. There we go. And I'll carry on adding some more of this blue colour around the outside. Everywhere that needs a little bit of colour, I've got a little bit of colour. And if you're ever not sure, just put your finger on the canvas and just take a little sample. Yes, I'm getting some colour back. There's some nice strong colour there. A little bit weak over here, but well, that's okay. See, look at that. It's nearly all oil there. There's no colour at all. So let's scrub a bit of paint on that spot. Just up behind those trees. But I think overall, pretty good. You can see now that Prussian blue colour, how much it's toned down and darkened down those edges. Now, the obvious thing to do is start to throw lots of white at this. But I'm going to urge you to be careful, because one blob of white on here can really ruin the whole illusion. And the idea is you want to apply this very sparingly. And I'm going to be using my fingers to paint this background sky quite a bit. But you decide what works best for you. If you like using a brush more, then do. See, I'm using a baby wipe here to get my hands clean. And that was a question that came up recently, actually. How do you manage to paint and not get your hands covered in it? And this is the reason why. If I get paint on my hands, I stop and I clean up. And the other place I always check, the handles. If you find you've got paint on your hands, the chances are you've got some on the handle of a brush too, like that. And if you don't get it off there, well, paint likes to leave calling cards. And the next time you pick up that brush, you're going to have blue on your hand again. So the trick is always check your brush handles. Give them a wipe on a regular basis and keep those clean, and your hands will stay clean. There you go. Another top tip for you. Now, let's get into this sky. As I mentioned, if you prefer to use a brush to paint with, that's absolutely fine. I don't mind using my hands. I'm quite pleased to use my fingers to paint with. So I've got a tiny bit of titanium white. I'm going to just knock the brightness off of it. I mentioned you really don't want to be using lots of white paint on your canvas. You'll really end up really ruining the illusion. If you get too much white on there, it's tricky to get rid of. And I'm going to take just a little touch of this blue colour on my fingertips, and I just want to kind of indicate the background sort of clouds a little bit more here. You see the difference. The acrylic sort of made this sort of nice sort of broken pattern, whereas the oil paint likes to sink into the grain of the canvas here, so you can use your fingers to sort of really press this in. Some nice effects going. And there's a bank of trees back there, so I mustn't lose those. To work over the top of them for the time being. Got a bit of white on my finger there, but that's okay. Some nice misty effects going through here. I think I might try and get a little bit more of a brightness. I think we had quite a nice sort of underside of a little cloud up there. Smudge that out with my fingertips. And above it, it's obviously going to be much darker. There we go. Now, once again, this looks super bright on the screen. Just to the side of the painting here, I've got another screen set up. And this looks really super bright. Let me just take the exposure down. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like to my eye. See how much darker and sort of shadier that is now. Whereas what you see on screen is a little bit sort of different. But I have to turn the exposure off a bit, or you won't see what I'm doing. Now, what happens if you do something like this and you think, ugh, that doesn't work out? I don't like the effect. Maybe I got too much paint on here. Well, you've still got your original blue brush here, so look. It's like magic. You can just rub it out. Now, yes, I'm putting Prussian blue on here with a mixture of Prussian blue and phthalo blue. But this is an incredibly forgiving painting. Working on a black canvas, you can rub things out. Don't forget we've got a tree coming through here. So you can go back in, you can play with your painting to your heart's content. And what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, I suppose if you painted something and it was really awful and your colours just got away from you completely, you could pick up a baby wipe and just wipe the whole thing down, leave it to dry. Come back, start again with some liquid clear, and off you go again. So this painting is almost impossible to break. Now, one thing I am going to do is put a little bit of mist around the moon. I want that to look like it's got a bit of a glow. There we go. A nice little ring around the moon. Here I've got some cotton buds. I cut them in half. And again, back in here, there's some little trees that I painted earlier on. I want these to have a little bit more of a silhouette against that moon. I just use the end of a cotton bud to find them again. Again, it's not so easy to spot on screen, but when you're sitting here, it's a little bit more obvious. So I can just create these nice little background features in my painting. I can find my trees again. You see the trees that I lost? They're still there. Just literally run cotton bud up and find them again. So I've gone hunting through my fan brushes and brushes, and I've got this little old fan brush and this very soft synthetic brush. See if I can work in a misty effect in there. But I've also got my secret weapon, which is my little cotton buzz. They work really great. What should we try first? Let's have a go with this one first. Again, just taking a little bit of this white, a little bit of blue mixed in with it. I want just the suggestion of a little bit of a misty effect here. And I don't know if this is going to be, it's a bit strong, isn't it? Let's knock a bit of paint off. These sorts of small misty effects, they can be kind of tricky sometimes. You do need to knock a lot of the paint off. Yeah, back in with my fan brush here and just kind of soften that whole effect up. You work up into the blue colour and you take it back down into that little bit of white there. You can kind of make these misty effects appear to be brighter, and you can make them disappear again. Now the trees I put on here, I mentioned, are placeholders. They are there simply to give me some context, but I don't have to just sit with these ones. I can paint more trees on top, so I think I might be adding a little more to my painting here. You see here's a very ghostly tree here, you barely see this one, so that might be just pushed into the background a little bit more. Push back to my fill brush. Once again, think about where the light is going to strike. Now, directly under these trees, you're not going to see very much. So you may not see anything particularly until you get to around about here. And so I'm just using a very, very grubby paint. Now I was trying to work in this little piece here, I couldn't work out whether there was water and a little waterfall. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. I haven't really made my mind up. But I think I should do soon, or else I'm going to be in a bit of trouble here, aren't I? So think about how you get from one level to another. Maybe there is a little bit of a drop here. But then that sort of indication that there is something like that happening. Once again, you want to just work this paint away from center, and as you work away from the center, you want to be working up into the darkness, and be afraid to let a little bit of the shadows grow through here. Up here, up under the trees, you want a lot less brightness, a lot more in the way of shadows. Remember, these shadows might be falling on the ground this way, so sometimes you want to be working away from that line. You want to leave a little shadow through here. And so this is one of those really fun paintings you can do. Leave little bits of dark in here and there. This might look like snow that's just sort of fallen. A few animals have plodded their way through it and left a few footprints here and there. And definitely want to be darker down here in these corners. You definitely don't want that to be really bright down here. You want the focal point is here, and you want everything to be fading away into darkness as it works away from that point. These little background bushes and trees in here, you can always come back in and just add a little bit of something around the base of the trees. Again, keep it nice and restrained. There you go, it's just using a fill brush, pressing and pushing. Kind of create these little grassy effects, these little bushes. say they work great when you're working on a dark background. Okay, I'm going to stand away from my painting, have a look at it from the other side of the room. I am going to drop the... That's how it looks where I'm. So I've had a good stand back from my painting and a good look at it, and I'm sort of weighing things up. What I'm looking at is proportions here. We know where the focal point's got to be, and now looking at the proportions of things like the size of this tree. It's about this big. In case you can't quite see it on screen, it's quite a sizable tree. And on this side, also quite sizable. But look at the width of this water. I think this water has suffered from something I call shrinkage. Yes. As we start to enjoy playing with snow, water starts to shrink. It starts to become sort of almost swallowed up. And this is a problem that sometimes happens when we sort of pulling the paint around a little bit and suddenly we realise what was supposed to be a nice pond or a sort of a nice sort of little river suddenly turns out to be more of a creek. And that won't really help very much. I think this has all just gotten a little bit sort of too small. The other problem I see is the fact that these two trees here, nice and big, nice and stout, nice and strong, tell me that I'm standing somewhere close to this area in my painting. And yet my water here tells me that I'm looking down on it. In other words, I'm looking almost from up on high. I'm looking down onto the surface of the water. So this tells me I'm at floor level. This tells me I'm above. So somewhere we have to try and sort of work this out. And my answer is to try and make the water a little bit wider. So I pulled out another little brush. I've got some Prussian blue. It's got a little bit stiff and dried. So the answer here, I think, is simply to push this snow back. And I'm going to push this snow back and then we'll see what it looks like in just a minute. And I'll do it with a little bit of time so you can see me move things out the way. So how about that? I changed my water from being sort of just normal and sort of like a little stream coming towards me. I started introducing a little bit of shape into it, letting the water widen out a little bit. This way it looks much more as though I'm standing at the water's level here. Notice I've taken the water almost right the way across my painting now, whereas it was just in here originally. I've opened it right out. And I've also introduced this little feature here so that it looks like the water's maybe going up behind this little bank of snow. Concentrate now on doing something with these trees. Now we've sort of got the water to the right proportions. Now some of these trees I'm not going to touch at all. They're sort of in the background. There's a little bit of, it's like some sort of cloud has gone through a couple of them, so they do need a bit of a recovery. Now, having a good selection of brushes sometimes is useful, and sometimes you do need little bristle brushes. You could try a filbert, but they're a little bit on the big side. So I'm going to try and do some little touches here. Now, I have pulled out a little bit of black because I want to actually do quite shadowy dark, sort of darker than sort of Prussian blue, almost like a navy blue hint with a touch of black in it. So very, very, very dark blue colours here. I don't want to paint straight black there because it might look a little bit sort of jarring. So very, very dark blue colour. Almost black. And again, I'm just going to run that down the back of that tree to restore the shadow. Now see, that doesn't jar too much. So you start playing around with the snow and putting in trees and then putting snow on branches, and suddenly, gosh, you're just having too much fun with it and you almost don't want it to come to an end. And as I say, I have a feeling this could be one of those paintings because, as I say, I've done this sort of scene before. Little things like just rubbing in a little bit of shadow there. Strong and dark at the base of the tree because remember there's a bit of moonlight coming this way. So the shadow here is going to be strong and blue, and up here it's going to become more and more sort of lost. But I love those little touches. Right, so you've seen what I'm doing with these trees. I'm going to do the same on the other side, and then I'm going to come back and play with the snow and start doing the water. Well, that last little sequence was full of fun, wasn't it? All these lovely spooky shadows and lumps and bumps on the trees there. And now I want to start using some slightly brighter colours here. Again, I'm not going to go all out with pure white colours. I'm going to use off-white colours, but they're maybe going to be a tiny bit brighter. Now, thing to remember about doing snow, because someone just dropped me a message saying, how can I make my snow look real? And the trick is to make it look as though it's actually tall. This looks like it's sort of running down into the water here. Remember, there's actually sort of should be a little bit of a sort of a drop to the waterline here. So the trick here is to make sure that you paint as though you're painting this on two levels. So you want to add snow as though it's sitting sort of up high like that, so it's catching the full brightness of the moon. And to make it look like it's actually sitting above the water. So you want a definite gap. There we go. So make it look like the snow is sitting right up above the water, and then from there on there wants to be a shadow under the snow. So this looks like it's actually sort of floating on a little shadow. Take that bit to the base of the tree. Got to be a little bit careful here because it can end up looking like this, like a foot of some strange animal. I once did a whole painting, all snow, and it was, I thought, delightful. I looked at the painting and I thought, gosh, that's really wonderful. And then I stood back and realised I'd painted, it looked like a big wild animal's feet. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to do the same here again, folks. So I have to pay a bit of attention here, not to be painting what looks like to be a Sasquatch foot. Can you believe it? Oh, you should. And that's all just part of the fun, really, isn't it, of painting? Sometimes you kind of look back and think to yourself, my goodness, what was I thinking? I just want to get some of that snow up the side of this tree. I'll do the same thing on this side. Join me back in a second when I'm going to put in some water. Now, for the water. I have a choice of brushes here, fans or that filbert again. Not sure which to use. I think I prefer the fan, to be honest. I did give it a wash. I'm going to go into some of this grubby off-white paint here. Now remember, this isn't supposed to be sort of jumping off the canvas too much here. This is already pretty bright. And remember, the water actually isn't just under the edge of those little bits of snow. It is actually sitting down lower. So you need to preserve this shadow. Here's my canvas does start to feel probably a little bit too sticky. Now you can bring this in close to here because there's a drop here under this piece, but across the top of that land you can bring that in close. Remember, the water is going behind this land, so you can come in above like that's okay. Come in above, and as soon as you get round that little point, that little tip there, remember this is sitting lower. Let's give it a bit more paint. This is sitting lower, so you've got to think about not coming up too close. So that looks like it's got a nice shadow under it now. It's a neat trick if you don't forget. There we go. Now see how that looks like it's sitting above the water. It's got its own little shadow. And if you get too much in the way of highlighting on here, if you think, well, I've overdone it a little bit and I've painted it in a little too much, it's super easy to fix. I still have my dark blue shadow brush here, so I can always go back in and paint in a few little dark ripples here and there. So I sort of put something in there, maybe a little dark ripple here and there. So anywhere that's a little bit overfilled, yes, you can put those little dark ripples back in again. I'm going to try using my filbert, give it a really good clean out. So this wants to be quite an intense glow because I want that moon to really sting out. So I'm going to take a little tiny drop, almost pure white here, almost pure white. I might have to use my fingers for this a little bit. And just drop that in there. Look at that. That's the brightest paint I've used on this painting so far. And this isn't pure white even. How about that? If I put pure white in there, it'll look like a big search beacon. Now, as I say, I want to just kind of soften this out. I got a little soft fan brush here. I'm going to just give that a little flick. Just a little lick of this colour here. This is white. Looks a little bit overexposed on the camera, but yeah, just a little lick of it. Now, you don't want the reflection to be going all the way, but maybe the moon could be sort of an ellipse sort of shape. Yeah, I could just do some little touches like that. These things work particularly well where you've got like a nice deep shadow. Maybe there's kind of a ripple on the water. You leave the little shadow, then you add another little lick there. Nice little shadow, and then another little lick of brightness there. And things close under the target, the focal point, they tend to bunch up a little tighter, and as they come towards you, so you tend to get these ripples separating out a little bit. Again, it's another one of those little Mother Nature things we have to take into account, that standing looking down on something tends to make things spread apart, whereas things you're looking off to the distance, like with waves, they tend to all kind of bunch up. Now, I'm still not using pure white here. I'm still using just dirty whites.
And then you could change it again.
I'm recording this. What did you say? The title for this?
Don't put your foot in it.
Okay. Problem is now I've seen it, I can't unsee it.
I know, but you're just going to have to put your head in front of it and then reveal it and just do a snapshot.
So there we have it, the finished painting. Now, if you ever find yourself wondering, what have I left out of my painting? What does my painting need? One thing it doesn't need is a giant foot, but the thing it absolutely does need is a focal point, somewhere to take your eye. It's a guided tour through your scene. Now, I hope you've enjoyed watching this and you've had a few laughs along the way, like Terry and I have had at my painting. And if you've enjoyed watching this, I urge you to watch another video or two of mine. I'll put one or two up for you to watch. The other thing I'd like you to do is, if you've got a moment, to just leave a comment below. You can give the painting a little tick to say you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm on a mission to try and get to 17,000 subscribers by Christmas. It's only 2 weeks away, and I'm about 400 short. So, happy painting, people. And as I say, don't forget, there's another lovely painting coming right along. Happy painting, people. I forgot my words.